The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Terry Duclos, and I'm one of the board members of Sophia's Portico, and so is...
I'm Carol Gordon, and I'm a board member.
And I'm Lori Reedy-Schmidt, I'm also a board member.
And Sophia's Portico is proud to sponsor this event called What is Consciousness, based on Regina Leffers' recently published book. And this event will be a conversation on consciousness, which we trust you will all participate in. Now, to begin with, we will tell you a little bit about Sophia's Portico. Some of you are familiar with us, and some of you aren't. So we're going to give you a little taste of Sophia's Portico in a nutshell. Sophia's Portico was established in 1992 as an art and spirituality center, focusing on the development of feminine values through formative programs, through art, through earth-based spirituality and rituals. Currently, Sophia's is kept alive by the talent and dedication of 10 board members. Now, Margaret Hofelder, who died in 2010, was the visionary of Sophia's Portico. A few members of a book group named the Searchers, we formed a steering committee discussing the desire to create a safe place where we could sit in a circle as equals to freely share each other's spiritual journey. A place where everyone could be heard and listened to. Now, many of the members of this steering committee felt the patriarchal institutional church lacked feminine values and no longer fed us spiritually. We hungered for the feminine face of God and set out with great energy and passion to uncover her, thus birthing the vision of Sophia's Portico.
Now, we have several very informative programs that we offer, and they consist of book discussions, presentations, and workshops. In the area of the arts, we sponsor an annual women's art fair. This year, it is on December 7th, and it will be our 19th fair. The programs also consist of healing art journeys and musical events. We believe that art and spirituality inform one another and come from the same source, our essence. One of the enriching programs at the Portico recently was provided by Regina, who led us on an exploration of our consciousness. Her enlightening presentation led us to many aha moments, and her guided meditations led us deeper into awareness and gratitude. Thank you.
Our earth-based spirituality honors Gaia, honors Mother Earth. And we do this through ritual, through seasonal earth-based rituals. We honor the winter and the summer solstices, the solstices, and the spring and fall equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days of Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasa, and Samhain, thank you. And we do this in various ways. Some are outdoors, some are indoors. We often will build a labyrinth, which we invite everyone to walk. We use song, we use dance, we use poetry, we use many things to honor the earth and to create a collective celebration of each of the seasons as they turn. As expressed in our vision statement, we offer supportive community in a safe haven, inclusive of creeds, cultures, genders, and races, and we seek to nurture spiritual growth in an atmosphere of peace, freedom, dignity, and justice.
And now, for the event that we are all gathered here for today, we'll turn this over to Regina and to Pat Ashton for a conversation on consciousness. And thank you for being here.
You want to go and recover your...
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Open it up.
Yeah. So, thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you, Terry, Carol, and Lori. Thank you to Sophia's Portico for what they bring to the world, to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Also, if as you go out there, Sophia's Portico has a table, and so if you feel like donating to them, please do, because that's what keeps them alive. So we'd all appreciate that.
One other housekeeping business. Thank you all for being here and for sitting up close. Always a struggle. No one wants to sit by the teacher. But thank you for being here and thank you for participating.
So I would like to now introduce Pat Ashton to you guys. And I will introduce him by what's most important to me. And he is one of the kindest human beings I know. He also has the courage to try to do what we're going to do today. He has the courage to try to be totally in the moment, vulnerable. We've all experienced intellectual stuff. That's been our whole lives. And so we are going to attempt to do this in a free-flowing way that is very vulnerable. So he has courage to do that, and I am grateful to him for that because I know the courage it takes me. So I know what he's got. So anyway, those two things, plus he's a very benevolent presence. My voice doesn't seem to shake in front of people when he's around. So I'm grateful for that sort of anchoring. He's also, less importantly, he's a retired professor from IPFW, sociology, peace studies. We wrote a book together with our colleague Matt Kubik when we were both there, called The Green Age. Still a very good book, I think. And he now, well, he's teaching right now at Manchester College, Manchester University too. But one of the big things he's doing right now is called intelligent adventure travel. So he and our former colleague Matt Kubik are now doing this thing together where they take people to Rome, groups of people to Rome every year. And it's just, you know, the art knocks your socks off. It's so beautiful. The architecture does the same thing. And these two supply both the intelligence to the trip and this wonderful, fun conversations. So that's Pat Ashton to me.
Wow. Well, thank you. Wow, it's almost impossible to follow that. Regina has been a mentor to me. We met at the university where things like credentials are important for various reasons. I was intrigued to find out that she had a bachelor's in psychology and a Ph.D. in philosophy. Now, Ph.D., that's Doctor of Philosophy in philosophy. That's deep. That's deep, let me tell you. I have a Doctor of Philosophy in sociology. Doctor of Philosophy in philosophy. Ooh. But see, the thing that was intriguing about that, so that sounds like, whoa, that's like super intellectual. But she's not like that at all. She's never been like that. And I mean that as a compliment. You know that. You know that. See, they know. That, and it comes out in so many ways. I met her when she was teaching construction technology. Here's somebody who spent, even though with a PhD in philosophy, has spent a lot of her life building and rebuilding things. But all the while, thinking about how those things related to where they came from, the resources that produced them, how people would interact within them, what would happen to these things, what effect that had on people and on the earth and nature. And that's how we came to work together, that Regina invited me to be part of a project that turned into the book, The Green Age, thinking about how to develop consciousness in people of our connection to the planet and our connection to the things we use and interact with and what that means. And I saw the challenges sometimes of teaching that, but I saw that she always stayed centered on connectedness to other people and to nature and that exploration. And that exploration has resulted in courses and several books, and ultimately in this book, What is Consciousness, that we're here, we've already gone, no, there we are, that we're here to talk about today, that I think is just the next step in evolution, and I'm just thrilled to be part of it. And it also is a guy named Pat. I've always thought of myself as a feminist man, and I'm glad to be sponsored by Sophia's Portico. I don't know how many of you thought that I was going to be a female. When I taught a women's studies course, believe me, the people were shocked on the first day of class. They said, "You're Pat Ashton?" Yeah. I'm very proud to say no one dropped that class. So I hope you'll stick with us through our work today. So let's get into this. The title of the book is What is Consciousness? The title of the conversation. What is consciousness, briefly, and why is it important for us to learn about it?
Okay, before I actually answer the question, I noticed that there are several people here who were on the focus group for the last 6 months before this book got published. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd just stand. So I noticed that Ann Beeching,
Hi.
Ellen Sauer, and Cheryl Sweet-Gardner.
They should be up here.
Yeah, and Pat Opper was not there every week. What she did was text me. She'd read what I wrote and text me and tell me everything that was wrong. So it was great. So what is consciousness? So I'm going to answer that question by not answering it.
Good.
In the way that we might expect, okay? Consciousness is something that we experience in the body. So consciousness is not just an intellectual concept that we need, that one definition is gonna speak to. If we go to words, I think we escape the experience of being conscious human beings. So what I want to do is just ask you to pay attention to your body. Like right now, feel yourself sitting in those comfortable seats. They are pretty comfortable, aren't they? Feel them. Feel your feet on the floor. Imagine the earth shining light, its radiant light, which it has, shining up through the feet and into the body. Feel that. Feel the body. Imagine taking a second and just paying attention to the breath going in and the breath going out. Just imagine that it's like a sunlight shining into the heart center from all directions and then out of the heart center in all directions. Just imagine that warmth, that light, that aliveness in the body. And it brings us to the exact point of consciousness. It brings us to this present moment, to where we are, what we're doing, our breath. That's as close to a definition of consciousness as I can get to.
I like it because it's about experience, that the experience of consciousness is, because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Being alive is different than being a collection of body parts that are moving in the world. And
yes.
That consciousness of the body is part of it's the experience of consciousness, really. So the experience of consciousness, why explore it further? Why not? We just experienced it, all of us here together for a moment, thank you. Now, why do we need to go deeper with that?
Well, it's the reason I wrote this book. So the reason is because people don't understand consciousness, what it is. They don't understand. We all have a general example, and probably the people in this room, more than anybody, would be aware that, yes, we've grown. We have had one perspective that carried forward to now, and that it's been different along the way, and that our opinions, our perspective on life will change as we continue in life. That if everyone can have that understanding and feel that understanding in the body, then what we've got is people who might be able to listen to the other perspective a little bit longer. And maybe we can begin to reach for understanding of where the other person is coming from.
In the way that I teach about this, coming at it from a sociological perspective, is we have this broader sense of experience. Psychologists tell us that every experience we've had is encoded in the brain somehow. It's all sort of there, but we never hold it in consciousness. Well, some of us have a very narrow understanding of what that consciousness is, and so that makes it hard to connect with anything else because it's so small. So the idea of growth, development, going deeper is expanding that understanding of what our experience in this body, in this life, means to us. And so it's expanding that. Now, whether we can ever get 100% overlap or not, I don't know. I'm not the one to answer that. But certainly, the more we know about our experience and what our experience means to us, the more I can identify with things in me that are connected to things in you at a deeper level, without the superficiality of you vote this way and I vote this way, or you drive this and I drive this, or you live here and I live there. All those superficial demographics that are less important, I mean, are significant, but not the ultimate human experience.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about facets of consciousness? Would you like to move to that?
maybe if I do that, just give a brief overview. That would probably be a good idea.
Okay.
So one of the things that the focus group helped narrow in is the idea that we grow into and through these facets of consciousness. And you'll recognize them in this, as you read the label. I'm just going to keep them up there for a while. Survive, we all know about what survival entails. So we're concerned with food and water and safety and security and that sort of thing. It's very basic. At any time in life, we can be thrown back into that. Think any soldier, any young man or woman, 18, 19 years old, that gets shipped into a war zone. Think about that. That person is immediately thrown into this level or this facet of consciousness, like an expression. And the older that person is, and the better they are equipped to bring their intelligence to use in surviving. Each of these facets represent a way, the amount of experience that we include in our definition of who we are. So at a survive level or facet of consciousness, what happens is we're including a very small amount of the world in our definition of who we are. We have to take care of ourselves or our kids or whatever, that kind of thing. As we move into other facets of consciousness, what happens is we expand the amount of experience, the amount of what exists in our definition of who we are. Example. When we're at a, now I was going to say sporting event, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say when we're in any situation where everybody in the room is feeling the same way, that immediately it extends our connectivity, who we think of ourselves as being. So think about a time when you experienced very deeply, and what I want you to do is just remember it. So don't put it into words. Just remember an experience of what I think of as oneness or wholeness. We often get it in big nature. It's like big nature enters into us and we feel this amazing connection to everything in existence. It's like we're thrown into immediate and extreme presencing, a way of being extremely present in that moment. Everybody recognize that? You've had an experience like that. You can remember it. That's located in be-oneness, that facet of consciousness. The other thing I would want to say is that the difference between these first 6 facets is that the first 6 facets are more like subsistence level of existence. So we think, I'm not doing enough, I'm not caring enough, I'm not working hard enough, that sort of thing. And I think of it as kind of moving over a bridge, through a portal, however you want to imagine it, where you can recognize, right, that you have made huge leaps in life. There's a place in your consciousness where you've really experienced stepping into an insight that you never had before, like an epiphany. That's what this leap into integrate and be authentic feels like to me and the focus group. So it feels like that because when we reach integrate and be authentic, when we enter into that, all of a sudden we recognize that I am enough. You know, it's not just recognition though, it's remembering, it's being in the body. That realization is in the entire being. And so I am enough. I do enough. I care enough. I feel enough. I work enough. All of that, and that has an impact on how we live then.
I don't know if this is sort of a pathway we don't necessarily want to go down, but it's interesting to me that the so-called hard sciences are exactly moving in this direction, that the more we understand quantum physics, for instance, the more we understand the incredibly interesting connectedness of things and the idea of superposition, that an atom separated by a universe can affect another atom. And can they explain it? No, but it's a reality. And so we're seeing that there is a level of creation, for whatever word you might want to use, but one you use here, that there is that connectedness, and it cannot really be achieved intellectually.
It can't.
The atoms are not doing it intellectually. We probably can't either.
No, you know, I had an experience that really taught me something like that, like in a period of time. Did I tell you about the experience of going to this outfit in Seattle that did an EEG and found brain trauma?
Yeah.
Then, yes, so I told you about it. I'll tell you guys.
Yeah, tell them, please, share, if you're willing.
What happened? I went because I was a little afraid. My mother had dementia before she died for about 10 or 12 years. It just came on slowly. And I thought, I'm going to go to an expert place and find out what's happening up there, because I have meditated every day for 40 years, every single day. It's the thing in my life that I have the 10,000 hours in, you know, and yet I couldn't forgive and have it stick. I would forgive, I'd reach, you know, that feeling of love and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the pain of the thing would come up again and reintroduce itself as if I had never done the work. So I thought, this is strange, given who I am.
It's a message.
I should be able to forgive and have it stick. So what I found out there is that when they did the EEG on me and found this brain trauma, the fingers of the brain trauma had entered every part of the brain and were handling it. And that, they expected me to present with no memory, no short-term memory at all, given what this brain trauma was like. And they expected me to present not being able to focus. And what I discovered when I was there is that the meditation actually assisted me in functioning normally. So I actually was able to remember and was able to focus, and that was cool. But the thing that taught me about that I can't get there intellectually is this. They designed this program for me on the computer, and my job was to simply observe. I was to do nothing, nothing at all. I simply observed the computer, and it had all these red, had an image of the trauma in my brain, an exact replica of my brain up there, and the fingers, the extensions, that was all in red. If my brain would turn any of it green at any moment, it got a sublime piece of music directed there for just a fraction of a second. I watched my brain work for that without any will or intellect happening at all. I was to just observe. And by the end, so I did this for half an hour every morning. Among the other stuff that I learned to do while I was there, this was every morning, half hour, and I watched. They made it harder and harder for my brain to actually do this. And by the end of my week there was a bell curve where the brain was then in the process of just healing itself. It was the trauma was completely healed. So that's an example of that kind of experience.
I told you she was deep. I heard whoa, yeah. That's really
Isn't that
deep.
a cool example? Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
ever experienced anything like that, Pat? Where you had to just be hands-off in order to learn whatever it was?
I do that every summer and fall in particular. We are lucky enough to have a backyard with woods on two sides of it. And I sit and just take in the trees. And there's, that moment of connection that you understand. I mean, intellectually, I understand the trees are providing oxygen and they're taking my carbon dioxide and the carbon dioxide of all of us. And I get that intellectually, but there's the experience of it that these things are here. And then I was driving this fall, not necessarily recommended you do this while you're driving, but sort of fell into this meditative state. And I'm thinking, isn't it amazing that these trees that I experience in the summer as the incredible generosity of nature, that it takes our waste products and gives us back gifts that allow us to live and to understand that intellectually, but just to be in the moment and experience that. And then in the fall, they die and they return, which in itself is pretty amazing, the deciduous trees anyway. But the fact that they do it in such a beautiful way. Why do the trees die in such a beautiful way that they turn all these colors and to entertain us? Are they entertaining themselves? I don't know. Maybe if we could talk to the Ents, Tolkien was maybe onto something there. But anyway, the experience of that, and of course the overwhelming beauty of fall and the beauty of spring, new life returning. But what I learned from you is not to intellectualize it, to just experience it and to just be in that moment. And you really can't describe it with words. It is be oneness. It is be creation. It is to just, I'm alive, I'm breathing, and they are too. We're all breathing together. And it's an experience. It's a symbiotic experience that allows me to experience the understanding of being one with nature. We're all just here and part of this thing, of this big blue marble floating in space. And there's some amazing things happening here.
Yeah. One of my friends, Ellen, brought up one day that the truth is there's nothing. We're standing on nothing. We're standing on nothing. In the sense that we're all atoms and molecules, speaking to what's real. That's physically real, and it's gravity that's holding us to this earth, right? All the invisible stuff.
I think Buckminster Fuller called it pattern integrity, that we impose patterns on reality. Really, of course, it's not there. The stage isn't here. You're not here. I'm here. We're all just quarks and various subatomic particles that are connected to other subatomic particles somewhere else in the universe, which is, mind-blowing. So you can't understand that intellectually. I don't know how quantum physicists do it. I'm not sure they do either.
Well, do you think that they take it into their bodies? I think that's key in understanding, in interpreting this stuff into our lives. We can intellectualize forever, right? Could go on and on and on. Could narrate.
Some of us have degrees in it.
That's right.
In intellectualizing it.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
we've been taught very well how to do it. It's how to unlearn some of that stuff that's been.
Yeah. And how to learn to actually live in the body, to actually feel alive in the body, to feel life in the body. Do you guys, do you relate to that at all? Yeah? Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes we go about our life and it's just a list of stuff we have to accomplish today and blah, 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 and we don't actually feel ourselves alive. So that's what all the mindfulness stuff is about, right? To bring us to the present moment.
Yeah. In the book, you talk about, and for each of these facets, you talk about love and fear. And I'd like to start with the negative, if we could, maybe, and talk about fear a little bit, because it seems to me that fear is one of those things that disconnects us from ourselves. And certainly, as you said a moment ago, you wrote the book to help people figure out how this connectedness. Of course, the equation, ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to hate, and so on. And in my experience, that's so true. And that fear, not only we deny parts of ourselves, but it projects so that we deny the humanity, whatever, of other people. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see the role of fear here and overcoming it.
So one of the things about these facets of consciousness is that thanks for that question, by the way. This is my favorite. I think it's my feeling is that it's more important than anything else, that we actually learn to feel love and fear in the body in every facet of consciousness. So we all can recognize what fear might feel like. We've probably all felt it if we don't have enough to eat. The feeling of love and fear in the body, so the feeling of fear in the body at any level of any facet, expressing through any facet of consciousness. We feel fear, and it's like fight-flight syndrome, it usually feel it right here, fear. And
I think people located different places in their body, different people located differently.
Do people locate fear differently in your body? Where do you feel it? Yes? In my chest. In your chest. Yes, it tightens up. Where do your chest? Neck. So fear can be felt different ways in the body. Different strengths, different places, and it's different at different times. So the roots of your teeth hurt when you're biting into something new that you're afraid of. Exactly. So fear, we feel like that, and differently. Love has a feeling in the body too. And love, we have these definitions of that word that we use every day. And so this is a different kind of love that we can feel in the body. So the difference has to do with a feeling of deep peace inside of the body. So love that might start out here, but extends all through us. We can feel it like that. Does that communicate?
And ready. So one, hold me up, and love, I'm ready to be open. Here.
That's very descriptive. Fear pulls me in, and love expresses me. Ready to be touched. Wonderful.
See, that connects, even though you put it in this facet of consciousness over here, belongingness and subsistence, but so I don't know how this fits in that scheme, but I think belonging is a very fascinating concept.
Yeah, so what would you add to this discussion from sociology? What do you think?
Well, one of the things that I think, there's no doubt that we as individuals experience inside our body and we think inside our consciousness, but that we are fundamentally social beings. As a species, we only exist because we figured out a way to cooperate with one another and at the survive level managed to overcome a great deal of obstacles. I mean, we're not very fast compared to other animals. We don't have sharp claws. We don't have sharp teeth. We're really pretty sorry in terms of survival in a natural environment, you know. We've got bigger brains, which is good, but you know, when you're being chased by a predator, say let's do riddles, best 2 out of 3. How about math problems? Can you do 2-digit addition? You know, you're pretty much going to be dead. So we managed to figure out ways to cooperate for survival, at the level of survive.
We did. Now we're faced.
And we still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we still need to. That's right, that doesn't go away. But I'm saying at the beginning of our species, and to a certain extent we've forgotten that because all this stuff has gotten in the way. You know, we live so distant from nature and so distant from the very fact that we're sitting here and the lights are shining and the PowerPoint is on, you know, and this power is all being produced somewhere and we're all using up resources and so on. And that's a reality, and it's a wonderful thing that we can be here to have this conversation and that we can have a printed book to read and all of that, but it all has implications. And so we've distanced ourselves from that very survive thing. So I don't think and I don't think you present it this way, but I think people often think of, well, I've taken care of the survival things, like I've got enough to eat, I've got protection from the elements, I'm okay. Now I can move on. You know, check, move to next level. But it's not. It's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
I think. And I think you're getting at that in this work, that it's a constant. So that connection, but I see that connection as not just one to nature, but one to each other. And that we're all here, of course, because somebody's nurtured us. Some people loved us. We belonged to some people, especially as children, who helped us discover parts of ourselves, helped us learn to be that person, to individuate. But at the same time, to comply, you say comply, I would also say cooperate, because that fundamental idea of cooperation, which is part of humans from the beginning. If we hadn't cooperated, we wouldn't be here. As individuals or as a species. So there's an interesting tension between the individual and the group. You know, and to what extent is consciousness collective consciousness? Now, I know psychologists have done a lot with that, and I don't want to go there.
I think it's important to go there.
All right.
Because that's the edge we're pushing. So we're pushing up against a number of edges, right? One of those edges is this exact thing, that our consciousness is collective. It's part of the world that we don't see. We can't see it, but it's collective. So if the reality, not if, the reality is that we are connected.
Yeah.
And it's simply us who have the ability to see only in 3 dimensions, right? So we don't see the places that we're connected. We simply are. And everybody in here, have you experienced the feeling of connectedness to another human being, where it's just simply there? Yes. Yes. Okay, everybody has experienced that. Okay, that's the reality. We function in life as if it's not. That collective consciousness, that underlying connectivity is conscious as well. Everything. Yeah. So that's one of the limits that we have to push up against and go into, not push up against, actually, that's the wrong metaphor, but we have to enter into that more ably, more confidently, treating it as reality. That's the reality that we live in, instead of treating it as, since I can't see it, maybe it's not real. Yet, we form our lives from this very stuff that we can't see. It's the most powerful part of our lives, that connectivity. So I have a question here, Pat, for you. Oh. So the thing that I have the question about is, do you feel like sociology as a way of thinking or observing the world can speak to that absolute connectivity that is there, to the constant consciousness that exists, of which we are part? We are part of that.
Yeah, well, my first reaction is to say, academic disciplines are completely artificial. and nobody lives in, even though I made jokes about philosophy and sociology and so on, I've never conceived of, the only reason I landed in sociology is because I was sort of major of the month and I kept trying everything else. And people would tell me, no, we don't study that here. That's this over here. So I'd go over there and they'd say, well, this is the limitations of our study. Politics, we don't talk about economics, we don't talk about politics, philosophy, go be a philosophy major or whatever. And I got to sociology and they say, it's sort of everything about people. And I said, bingo. I'll be that. Because I couldn't, figure out. So to me, the disciplinary lines are really artificially drawn and completely meaningless, I think, ultimately. I think there are ways of thinking about. I think that there are ways of thinking from the inside out and the outside in. There are ways of thinking about me and my experience and ways of thinking about us and our experience. And I think those are the dimensions that matter. So there is something called the sociological imagination that an American sociologist invented the term. But I like it because imagination, we have to use our imagination. We have to use our creativity to think about not only what we experience, but what could be. That's the letting come aspect, right? So we want to think imaginatively about how we're living together, how we're being together, how that collective consciousness is expressing itself. So I think to the extent that the sociology side focuses on thinking about the group and group dynamics, and certainly we know the experience is different. I mean, there's a sociologist who did something called social geometry, and I lay this out for the class, that the group of two has a certain kind of dynamic, right? But then when you add a third person, we all know that the dynamics of the group change when there's three people, because you have the possibility of 2 against 1, and so on. But for every person you add after that, the relationships increase exponentially. So if you want to do the math is n times n minus 1. So in any group, say a group of 5 people, you have 5 times 5 minus 4, minus 5 minus 1 is 4. So you have 20 relationships in a group of 5 people. So you're managing 20 relationships. So the level of complexity is incredible. So even in a group of 15 or 25 or 30, you're talking about incredible numbers of relationships. So it's an amazing thing that our brain is able to do that. We've learned a lot about other primates. Chimps have, it appears, 3 levels of intentionality. That is, they can decode 3 levels of what-ifs about relationships. Like, if I do this, Regina will be upset, but Regina's friends will also be upset and mad at me, or whatever, or will like me, or Regina told these people I'm cool, so I guess I'm cool because, But humans can do fifth level intentionality, which is just mind-blowing to me. So what do we do with that? To me, that's a kind of level of social consciousness that is
How
incredibly
do you feel
intriguing.
it in your body? So this social consciousness, we're all recognizing what he's talking about, right? Anybody have any questions about that?
There will not be an exam.
I think we can all relate to what he's saying. How do we experience that connectivity in the body? I think that when we reach for I'm just going to say peace in the world, for lack of a better way to say it. When we reach for peace, what has to happen inside of not only our individual consciousness, but inside of the consciousness of people? How many consciousnesses have to get to that place where that's what we're going for? And what does peace mean? What do I mean by peace? I mean where people actually start listening to each other instead of taking it in, interpreting, and then hating, or deep sixing on Facebook, So listening probably is the thing. Once we listen, really listen. So I'm talking about deep listening, not just listening while we're thinking of something else to say back. The right way to do something, but really deep listening. What would change? How many consciousnesses do we have to have going there? How do we develop it individually?
When you think about it, you're talking about, when you breathe in and we become aware of our breath. I mean, the interesting thing is, I've been following, a lot of astrophysics and cosmology and so on lately, and I find it interesting that they're some of the most out there people, literally and figuratively, because they are discovering and talking about this. First of all, we're all just star matter that's part of this universe. But the air we're breathing, it's the same air that humans have always breathed on this planet. That's how much there is, and there ain't no more. And it's always been part of this atmosphere. So when we're breathing, we are literally breathing in all of everyone who's ever lived, really, and every being, and every being who's dependent upon oxygen. So, and that sounds sort of like, wow, that's like really, but this is what they're telling us. This is what science is telling us. And so if we take that into meditation, and I'm just breathing and I'm aware of my breathing, I am connected through my breath, not only as someone living now, but in the air that I breathe and take in, the oxygen is the oxygen that has been put back by those wonderful trees, but has been also breathed by all these other people. So I am oneness in creation. In a very social way, and this aspect of it is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. anybody else have anything to add to that? Yeah, Ellen.
Like I could feel myself almost, I want to belong here, and yet I want to go, this is that facet piece. It's not a level going up and down. It's, I bounce back and around. But how many of us at one point can be in oneness with reals to make the choice?
So for the TV, how many of us need to be in oneness? Ellen's saying, I need to be in oneness. She needs to be in oneness in order to be in that place where we achieve peace. I would like to say that during this class that we had at Sophia's Portico, where we went through this book for 10 weeks, one of the things that happened, I think it was like the first or second week, Rick or Sue, if you remember, Dale, it was when we experienced, each one of us we experienced that deep oneness experience of big nature, or holding a grandchild, or some other sublime experience that brought us into that extreme presencing. I am here now, and feel connected to everything that is. What happened, what we did, was people then described their experience of oneness, and everybody else just listened with their whole bodies. And what we learned is that experience of oneness that people described and remembered, it's so physical, that remembering without the thoughts, but with the feeling of being extremely present, that everyone in the room could feel. It was an amazing thing to then walk out of that class. It was like the most awesome experience was knowing that everybody in the room could feel exactly that. Mm-hmm. In their bodies. They felt what I felt at the same time I described it. Do you get that? You've done that, right? Have you done that? It's pretty awesome. And that's the example of how many of us would it take? I don't know, but I'd like us to get there all together, all of us. Cheryl.
Oneness would be, so I think the more of us that are in oneness will just make it explain easy.
Can I
Yes.
go back to...
Yeah. Do you want to repeat what Cheryl said? just a synopsis. A synopsis.
Oneness, I'll try to communicate for the communicator. That oneness is perhaps exponential, and so that when we're in oneness and we're in oneness together, that the power and the flow of that, I'm paraphrasing here, but it can be even more powerful and radiate to more people in more different ways because of its power. Yeah, which is, I wanted to go back to the tipping point. This is sort of the sociologist in me, but I've done workshops for people and I talk in my classes because you bring up problems and people always say, well, what can we do about it? So, well, you have to make social change, which is partly inside and partly outside. And I'm very impressed by Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, where he references a lot of research. So it's unfair to just, for him to get credit, I don't know. But he speaks to a really true phenomenon that all social changes that you might admire in the world, that some of the people here might admire, the civil rights movement anti-war movement, the feminist movement. Never did a majority of people support them. Most of the Americans didn't support civil rights. Only a tiny minority marched, demonstrated, whatever. It's never been more than. So the concept of virality, like a virus, spreading like a virus, that's the tipping point. The idea that but I think it goes to the fear side as well. And I was thinking to this when you were talking, Cheryl, about this, because, how does a virus spread? So that if somebody here is sick and you sneeze and it's in the air, then all of us are one with your flu. But I mean, isn't that really true? I mean, that's our fear, that we're exposed to this virus, that then because we're here, because we're sharing this moment, because we're in this room breathing this air together, we are now exposed to this virus. So that's the fear side. The virus as fear, or the viral fear, or whatever you want to talk about it. And there's certainly a lot of infection going on in our society today and in people's lives. But the positive side, and I'm fundamentally an optimist, and my experience has made me believe that we can change. And so I think the tipping point is that how do we create that oneness and that connectedness with a significant enough group that it spreads. And all social change. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small, committed group hasn't changed the world. It's the only thing that ever has. And I mean, she was absolutely right from a social science point of view, that it's always been a minority that changes the world. So that should give us great hope. It gives me great hope anyway. I don't know what it should do. It's wrong to say that should give us great hope. I take great hope from that and try to, would pass that optimism on, that we can, through explorations like this, inside and outside, make those changes, make those connections.
Rick?
Yeah, so you need a leader, in my opinion, that attunes the group to whatever, this oneness or whatever. And of course, the opposite is fear, and I think we're seeing that on the national stage. They can also be attuned to fear and bring out the worst in people. But the leader is still crucial in this. And then one other thing I want to say, something Cheryl said, I think a person who, I'm not enlightened, but is pretty far down the path, to walk in a room, in my opinion, and the entire group is better, almost immediately. Because something within them, he's again like a tuning fork, or she, and they attune to his level.
Okay, can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Whatever you want.
No. So what I want to say, Rick, I learned a lot in that 10 weeks. I learned a tremendous amount. So what Rick said was, for the TV, that we need a leader to presence so powerfully in a room that we can all attune to it. Okay, made it little, but that's about what you said. I want to say this to that. I want every individual who is in this room, every individual on the planet, every individual who reads this book, I want people to feel themselves as the catalyst, the tuning fork that you talk about, Rick, the tuning fork for this change that we really need to make in humanity if we're going to keep going. And I'm optimistic too, because I see the capacity. I got to be with this group of people actually it was 2 groups of people for 10 weeks at Sophia's Portico, and I got to feel what happened. Now, they're already going to Sophia's Portico classes, so they're all pretty far along the road of really wanting to go where we went. But the tuning fork, being a tuning fork, you've shared with me that you go to that place of oneness that you experienced in your daughter's house, sitting in a recliner, listening so acutely to his wife read a story to the grandchild sitting on her lap. And he felt this overwhelming experience of oneness. Did you all feel that? I mean, it just flooded through my whole body when I spoke it. I hope you can feel it. You could sure feel it when he described it, when he remembered it. And so my challenge is to really start viewing yourself, for us to all really start viewing ourselves as it's personal responsibility to, before we do anything in the day, open eyes in the morning and remember an experience of oneness, to connect you to this you that encompasses all of existence before you even put your feet down on the floor. Do the same thing at night. And what will happen, and I don't know if you have experienced it yet, but it will begin to bleed into the daily life, the life that we live. People will feel that before we even meet with them. That's the tuning fork.
I love that metaphor of the tuning fork on so many levels, because we talk about health in the body as a kind of tune-up, tuning fork of the body, of the metabolism, of so on, of the brain. And the healthy brain is one that's sort of in tune, right? And when things block the tune or stop it. But also the tuning fork, of course, is felt in the body. When you play that pure tone, you don't just hear it in your ears. I mean, you feel it, right?
Feel it.
You do. And then there's the social side of it, which I'm attuned to, if you will, that we've been doing this since we've been on the planet. You know, that they just now, in the caves like at Lascaux, that are 35,000 years old, the drawings on the cave walls, which are much more complex than they first let on. They said, oh, it's all about the hunt and everything. It turns out, no, it's about storytelling and dancing, and they're finding out lots of interesting things. But they just went in with acoustic instrumentation and discovered that the places where those paintings are in the caves are the most resonant in the cave. And they've also found petrified bamboo flutes. So that people were probably in there chanting and playing like tuning forks and experiencing the vibrations of that location. Now, it's prehistory. It's not written down except what they left us on the cave. But it's powerful stuff that deep in the cave, not where people lived. There's no evidence that people lived in this area. So people went there to do something, paint, and probably create vibrations. And so it makes me very optimistic that this is something we've been doing for a long time and that we've forgotten a lot about. And if we can revive the practice to be in tune ourselves, but then to be in tune, as Cheryl was talking about, the oneness connected and the connectedness to one another. I love that tuning fork metaphor because it's a tone that's felt and can be shared.
So that's great. Do you guys recognize? Yes.
So are you saying that the energy still exists from all that time ago? Like the
Yes.
vibrations are?
I think so. Yes. it doesn't go away. It remains in the universe, yeah?
As we know, what you put out is what you get back.
I mean, metaphorically, but literally as well. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I know. It's amazing to contemplate.
Okay, yes.
And I might add, the energy just doesn't, for me, I don't envision the energy just being in that space, but I feel like it's so deeply in our bodies. I'm not planted here by Reg. I really, I'm going to say that again. But in our bodies, and in our DNA, in our cells. So it's in us.
Yes.
You know, yes, we feel it. When we go to those spaces, we feel it because we remember it, because it's in us already. You know, that's I don't know if that.
And it does, yes, exactly, right.
No, there's been a tune that's been playing since the Big Bang that is part of the atoms and subatomic particles and everything else that make us up.
Okay, so one idea that I'd like to bring up, and I want to actually, it's a genuine question too. So when you experience that be-oneness, that extreme, extraordinary presence, is it also the most enjoyable moment you've lived? Not most enjoyable, but it's like living enjoyment in that
Most
moment
alive.
too.
You're fully alive.
Fully
Yeah.
alive.
Live all the time, and we have created stories that separates us from this.
So
Yeah.
true. So Elizabeth said we've created stories.
It's part of
we-
that, as Rick was saying.
Yes.
It's the barriers that,
And that's not only to each other, but it's to the earth and everything in the earth, all the plants, all the animals, all the insects. Everything has a purpose, and everything, I believe, has a joy in expressing their purpose, doesn't matter what it is. And science is starting to show that with the trees.
It's in everything, and we've storied ourselves out of it. That's the short version.
Now our job is to pay attention to when, oops, I just took myself out of it again.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
let ourselves go.
Rick talked about it the other day, described it as stopping the narration that goes along with every experience. Do you guys experience that too? Like when you're doing something, there's some narration that's going to go on in the head about what you're doing at the same time. It's like the story is forming right then. And Rick talked about, I just have to stop the narration, stop living the story of what I'm doing in that moment, and start living the experience. So it sounds like we're about done here, right? This has been wonderful.
thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of this.
And please remember to take a book if you don't have one. You're welcome. You're welcome, Kathy. Thanks for coming.